Hello and welcome to The Nation. I'm Melissa Ong. Today we'll be highlighting the rise of a data center hub in Southeast Asia. As global demands for data storage and processing surge, Malaysia is emerging as a key player in the region, attracting major investments and positioning itself as a strategic hub. To help us understand this trend, joining us in the studio are two industry leaders, SARKUNARAJAH S, a seasoned IT infrastructure and operations professional, and we also have Bobby Varanasi, the CEO of Regenerative Futures. So welcome, gentlemen. Well, I'd like to start off with this. What makes Malaysia an increasingly attractive destination for new data centers? And, you know, Johor in particular is experiencing a boom. Its Menteri Besar, Dato' Onn Hafiz Ghazi, has been quoted as saying there are about 50 or more than 50 data centers wanting and having interest in Malaysia and wanting to set up right here in Malaysia. So what are the main factors driving this trend? So we'll start off with Sarkuna.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I think there are a few factors, but the first and foremost and the biggest advantage that Malaysia has is that as a nation we are disaster-free zone, right? So we are not facing major natural disasters such as hurricanes, earthquakes, and so on and so forth. So that's definitely for a resilient and high availability data center. The geographical location is critical, right? The stability of the geographical location. Number two would be favorable government policies. Our government has been very favorable to the industry players in the data center space to bring in and build new data centers here. Last but not least, of course, we are also close to the major markets around the region, right? And that definitely places an advantage for Malaysia's data center market.
Bobby, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he said it right. And the larger perspective stems from the globalization of data itself, its creation, its consumption, and its utilization. Economically speaking, Asia Pacific is contributing to 40% of the global GDP, and it's only growing. So as a consequence, you will see that the amount of data that is going to grow from a standpoint of both production and consumption is only going to need more and more data centers. And I think that is where Malaysia is well poised.
Yeah, Sarkuna, in your experience with IT infrastructure as a whole, how does Malaysia's, as you mentioned earlier, geographical location enhance now the efficiency and also the reliability of data center operations?
First and foremost, we have a very mature and skilled workforce, right? Though the data center boom is pretty recent, started sometime in year 2000 and onwards. However, Malaysia for the longest time has been a big player in the semiconductor industry. And semiconductor industries are high availability industries, right? So, and they have been operating in Malaysia for about 5 decades now. So if you look at the talent pool from that space, people know how to maintain highly reliable, mission critical environments. So that knowledge is transferable to the data center space as well. And then in terms of infrastructure, especially power infrastructure, it's very stable in Malaysia. And in fact, we have a cost advantage there as well. In terms of electricity tariff, we are one of the lowest in ASEAN, definitely cheaper than Thailand and Singapore, right? Last but not least, we are also very close to the land and undersea fiber connectivity to rest of the world, right? So that's definitely, we can't have downtimes related to connectivity issues. So that contributes to that reliability and efficiency of data centers.
And for a global business perspective, how does Malaysia's strategic position right here in Southeast Asia benefit companies, especially if they're looking to establish and expand their data center presence right here in Asia? Bobby?
We have to look and have a conversation outside of data centers. Let us take an economic perspective. That is what is more important for any investor who's coming to the country. Data is just a route too. So the data centers are only a fillip. It just gets them a footprint, in the country, in the region, to be able to create their own products and services and also service their own customers. So in that context, it is not about a competitive model where we seem to be missing the point in saying we are now competing. We're not competing. We are collaborating and contributing to a global demand for data centers, because that is where digital economies are going to be created out of. So in that larger context, if we, for example, look at Amazon has 148 data centers around the world. So are we saying that each of the countries are competing? No, they're not competing. They are all collaborating. For Amazon, where it is promising that it is going to help at least 80% of global businesses leverage cloud infrastructure and digital technologies to further their own business models, the availability of all these data centers around the world is extremely crucial from an availability standpoint, from a redundancy and latency and proximity to customer base. All of these being said, it is today, we're only talking about Amazon and Google. And slowly you'll start finding that even the local consumption, for example, at Maybank or a Citibank, or a CIMB, they are also not only consuming data, but they're also producing data. So all of that together needs a lot of data centers. So let us look at the focus is not the data center, but what does it help us get to economically?
So you are saying that this is like an ecosystem.
It's an ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's a starting point, like infrastructure, right? You have roads, but roads, if they don't go anywhere, there's no point. But building roads to create connectivity between, consumers and populations is when you create an economic value, right? That's how it is.
So are you saying that Singapore is not a competitor?
No, they are absolutely. See, everybody is going to compete for a piece of the pie. But let's not say that the pie is about 35 or 50 data centers that will end up creating a couple of thousand jobs. Let us look at, okay, are they going to become economic enablers for specific sectors where we can take leadership? So Malaysia, oil and gas, yes, absolutely. Across the entire value chain, we could be taking leadership as that industry itself is becoming completely digital.
Right.
But Singapore, when it comes to financial services, they are already far ahead. So, it is going to be collaborative and no longer hardcore competitive.
Good point, good point. Now, we'll talk about environmental and infrastructure benefits. And how do Malaysia's environmental conditions and infrastructure support the development and also the sustainable and resilient data centers?
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, one is we are disaster free zone, right? But we are also a tropical country, and this is a catch-22 situation. As a tropical country, data centers need a lot of cooling, and if they're operating in a warm climate, definitely we need a lot more efficient cooling mechanisms in place. However, the biggest advantage that we have is we also get a lot of sunlight. So we are in an advantage to have solar power powering all these data centers, and we are already seeing that's happening. YTL Power is building their power plant in Johor, which is, I believe, is 500 megawatt power plant to supply power to those data centers in that location, right? So there's definitely that advantage. So when we are using solar, it's a lot more efficient. It's a lot more, more than efficient is, it's clean, it's renewable energy, right? That's definitely a big advantage in that space, right? And when you talk about that, I think is one of the key factors that is working to our advantage.
Bobby, what do you think? I know Malaysia, as we all know, is a low-risk disaster area, not like Philippines or Hong Kong or Taiwan, right? How does this factor contribute to the resilience and also reliability and continuity of data center operations?
Data centers will continue. There is no issue with that. And like he rightly pointed out, so I won't want to belabor the same points. Yeah, it is a stable economy. So long as you have a stable government, stable economy, geographically we are fine. So these data centers will continue to proliferate. What will be interesting to understand, and that you mentioned Singapore, right? Just a few minutes ago, they had a moratorium on data centers. Why? Why did they do it? Because if they're sitting with the same strategic advantages as Malaysia, why did they put a moratorium? And it's important to understand and appreciate that the catch-22 that he talks about is between economic growth, unfettered economic growth and capitalism on one end versus responsible growth on the other end. Right now, they don't seem to be seeing eye to eye. Let me give you an example. We talk about installed capacity. Let's take broad statistics of Malaysia. Total energy installed capacity is 46 gigawatts. The data center industry going into the next 10 years will only need it's about some 3,221 megawatts. So it's a drop in the ocean. So if we say that, okay, energy is being consumed too much, we are producing a lot more than we are consuming. So there is no issue there. So you cannot have that environmental argument there. Where it comes to play is of that new energy that is being generated, how much of that is renewable energy, which unfortunately we are not. our almost 95 to 96% of our entire installed capacity right now is what you call as dirty energy, right? And that will continue to happen. So the question now is going to be is, we are going to reach a point in time where we have to make these very interesting choices between growth of an industry versus the environmental implications of that very industry and its long tail problems. But right now, we're not talking about it. Because worldwide, outside of 2 countries, nobody's talking about it. Because they've already gone through the problems. And if you bear with me for a quick 10 seconds, Netherlands was the first country in the world actually to ask for data centers to be consolidated. The worldwide view for technologists is that the more data centers you have, there is more reliability because you can spread across the networks. You can create redundancies, right? Because you and I want things happening quickly, and network should be 24/7. But Netherlands went the other way around because they committed to reducing their carbon footprint. And with that commitment in mind, they took a hit on the industry side, although their energy consumption reduced by 50% by consolidating data centers. What they exposed themselves to is a slightly higher level of business risk with respect to resilience and redundancy. These are choices that are not easy to make, but we will get there in another decade, and we will have to make those choices.
We'll have to take a short commercial break, so we'll be right back after these short messages. Welcome back with me, and here is our guest, Sakruna and also Bobby, and we're talking about the increased rise of data centers right here in Malaysia. You know, Bobby, we just had a short conversation, and I told you, I read that, you know, the Johor Bahru City Council Mayor was reportedly saying that the data center investments should not compromise local resource needs. So, what are your thoughts on this?
This is an interesting conversation that is happening worldwide. If you take a larger perspective, we are in the era of water scarcity worldwide. So the amount of water table, you know, that has been depleted is significant, and no country is outside of it, Malaysia too. In fact, out of the 7 rivers in Malaysia that supply clean water, 3 of them are already polluted with salt water because of a backflow that is happening thanks to some other issues we can talk later. So which means that we are losing groundwater and drinking water at a significant pace. Now, you could argue that I could take in seawater and start using it for cooling systems. However, the leaching into the ground creates problems unless the entire ecosystem of managing those resources and ensuring that leaching does not happen, which can then lead to farming communities being, you know, disastrously affected, local communities having their water tables, you know, depleted. All of these versus if most of the water, for example, in Air Selangor or somebody is going to supply to the data centers, then what would be the cost implications for you and I as consumers? Would we start seeing a significant increase in water, the cost of water?
Stop water, yes.
And that is going to be the bigger questions right now. So worldwide, the question is, where there is less installed capacity of energy and sufficient amount of water, the battle is between these two. So let's look at it this way. For data center purposes, more the energy used, less the water required. Whereas the other way around, if you more water and less energy. So Malaysia right now is comfortable, it has got a lot of energy. Doesn't have to worry about water, but there will come a time again, this might tilt. So I think what the mayor is doing, I think he's taking a long view, and I think he's doing an amazing job, but the industry won't like it.
That's for sure. Because, your thoughts, Sakruna, on this?
Yes, because like I said earlier, right, we are operating in a warm country. These data centers are operating in a warm country. So cooling becomes critical, right? As the data center sizes grow, the cooling requirements will grow with it. And some of the latest technologies to cool data centers are liquid to chip cooling technologies, and that requires a lot of water, right? So if that is the path that most data centers will take, then like what like what the mayor of Johor said, there will be a lot of stress on our water needs, right, for the rest of the population. So that need to be managed. There are other form of cooling technologies that are available as well, and they will require considerable investment. So when we talk about data center investments, that is one piece of the investment. But how much do these operators have to invest in cooling? And the cooling cost in long run should not be more than the investment to build the data center, which means is going to hit their bottom line, right? The revenue will get hit. So we have to play that balancing game where data center operators who are coming into Malaysia feel like, okay, we are making X investment, we are getting 10x return from it. How do we maintain that edge?
If I may quickly interrupt, I think this is where government has a great role to play in taking a leadership stance and saying, these are the parameters within which you will operate data centers. You will not do it willy-nilly as you want. See, for example, right now we're talking about, we're going to keep on increasing the investments. But if I say responsibly, I want all of you to come and invest, yes, but these are the conditions within which we'll operate. Whether it is about energy, whether it's about water, cooling systems, I do not want you to start leaching into the economic components or the civil components. But you do only these things, only then can you operate a data center here. And I think that is the route we should take. If I had the opportunity to tell the Honorable Mr. Gobind Singh Dio, the Minister of Digital, to say that is how you can probably take the leadership role to the investors and say, look, we want you in, but let us be responsible with a collective view to the future. And exactly EU is just coming up with a massive regulation around ESG reporting for data centers and also holding them accountable in the balance sheets. If they're already doing it, I think we should also follow on similar lines.
Let's shift our gears and talk about the future prospect and also the challenges. What do you see the biggest opportunities and challenges for Malaysia to maintain its status as a top data center destination? As we all know, we are really hot now, right? Malaysia is a hot location. So what are your thoughts, Sarkuna?
Number one is we have to go back to that conversation around energy efficiency. Bobby highlighted the concern earlier about 90 to 95% of our energy production is what would be classified as dirty energy, right? So how do we become more energy efficient, but that energy is a sustainable, renewable energy? That's important, right? Because that gives a very positive push to attract more data center operators in the country. We truly cannot compete with cost because there's always another location that will be cheaper, but keeping the operational cost of data centers lower in terms of energy, water and everything else, that can help, right? And number three is, what I would say is the government to give more incentive to build an ecosystem, a data center ecosystem, and a lot faster than how long it took us to build a semiconductor ecosystem. That took about 5 decades, right? But how do we build a data center ecosystem? That means give more incentive for SME players to enter the data center business. So once we build that ecosystem, that's where we have a real advantage for, there's an economic prosperity to it, more job opportunities for Malaysians. But on top of that, we also get more local players. So today, while I do not know the numbers, but we really need to look at how much of these data center players are local players versus foreign players, right? So we do want to increase the number of local players in the industry. I think focusing on those areas are critical.
I would take a very different view. I think what you said about data centers today, this is the same conversation over the last 15 years I'm seeing in Malaysia for every single new industry that's come to play. Today it is data centers. 15 years ago it was outsourcing center. The same conversation, nothing has moved an inch because we seem to be, missing the forest for the trees. The conversation here is, although it's about data centers, the opportunity is not about data centers. Let's not get caught up there. The opportunity lies in the industries that you create leveraging data. So let's forget the center part, that is infrastructure, hardcore infrastructure, whether it is owned by a foreigner or a local, actually it does not matter. It is just infrastructure play, man. How much is the government going to get out of it? A foreigner or a local, they're going to pay the same taxes anyway. No difference. No, what is important is that the amount of data that is being stored in that country, is it now being leveraged by a whole number of businesses? For their global footprints are also, they're leveraging this footprint, which then creates long tail jobs and opportunities in, for example, digital domains, in sector specific domains, whether it is in renewable energy or whether it is in banking and financial services, a whole number of places. So if I say for every $10 billion or of a data center investment, it only creates 3,500 jobs. I'm thinking the amount of data, that's about 25, 30 exabytes of data that gets generated in the next 10 years in that same window is probably going to mean 3 to 4 million new jobs, technologically savvy jobs across industries. So let us not get too pigeonholed into looking at the infrastructure, but its location is important to be here so that it can then create and spawn a whole number of other sectors. So we shouldn't get caught up in saying how many more data centers, but how many more opportunities that come up from those data centers. That is how I would look at it. Then local, foreign, doesn't really matter because there's an economic accrual happening any which way.
Yep.
Looking ahead, what advancements in IT infrastructure should Malaysia focus on to keep attracting global data center investments? Sarkuna, you will take this question as an IT expert.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what consumes a lot of energy in data centers is the hardware. So, when we look at computing, we need to move into green computing. So, green computing is hardware and software. But I'll cover the hardware portion first. Data centers are full of servers. Over time, we continue to build servers that are more energy efficient, right? But that requires stack refresh. So you can't be running a server that was built and deployed 5 years ago, whose energy consumption is much higher than the latest servers, right? Or the latest hardware. So one of the things that the government can do is, how do we continue to keep our data centers modern? So what I would suggest is to start thinking around providing incentives, some form of incentive, right? Tax breaks and so on and so forth, to allow data centers to continue to upgrade their hardware to a more energy efficient hardware. That means we continuously will be attractive to the market, to the data center players, to say, hey, if I go into Malaysia, these are the advantage. Every 5 years, I get to refresh my technology and so on and so forth. That's one. The number two is also still on green computing, but on software, right? We have to look at software development, software engineering. There's been enough papers that has been written around energy efficiency of programming languages. So today, data analytics is big, and if you look at what is the preferred language for the players in that data analytics space, they often go to Python, right? But if you look at the energy efficiency ranking, Python is one of the least energy efficient programming languages as compared to Java. Java is a lot more energy efficient, right? So software plays a part. When we talk about data centers, sometimes the focus is very much on physical, right? Just now we talked about cooling and so on and so forth, but we also have to look at the software part of it. To summarize that, we need to get more green computing conversations happening in the country, and I think institutions of higher learnings have a big opportunity in that space, start to churn out graduates, especially in the IT industry, who consistently think about green computing in their day-to-day work, projects, and so on and so forth. I think that's critical. And I already mentioned this earlier, create a pool of, encourage more SMEs around in that space as well.
Well, gentlemen, a lot to talk about. We can go on and on, but unfortunately, that's the only time we have right now here. We can take this offline. And that brings us to the end of our discussion today. We've seen how Malaysia is positioning itself as a leader in the digital space with significant investments and strategic developments in the data center industry. It's clear that Malaysia's role in the digital future of Southeast Asia is only set to grow. And a big thank you to our guests, Sarkuna and also Bobby, for joining me right here in the studio, for sharing your insights and expertise. I'm Melissa Ong. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay tuned to The Nation for more in-depth coverage of stories that matters.